Today's episode of Shockwaves is brought to you by Shudder. Brought to you by AMC Networks, Shudder is not only a premium streaming video service, but an experience unlike any other. Created for fans of all degrees of thriller, suspense, and horror, Shudder is home to the largest and fastest-growing human-curated selection of high-quality, spine-tingling, and provocative films, TV series, and originals. And there's always something new and unexpected for Shudder members to explore. New this week is supernatural sci-fi series Missions, a new Shudder original. In a not-too-far-distant future, an eccentric Swiss billionaire manages to launch the first civilian mission to Mars. After 10 months of space travel, the day before they land, the crew learns some bad news. They have been overtaken by their American competitors and their revolutionary technology. They will not be the first on Mars.
Once they arrive on Mars, they find that the American crew they expected to be greeting them is nowhere to be found. It's only later that they find a survivor, but he is not from the American mission. He is Russian, and he is the first man who died in space in 1967. Steeped in a space adventure mystery, human drama, time-shifting intrigue, and extraterrestrial threat, Missions is an engaging blend of thriller, science fiction, and horror. The series blasts off with a premise straight out of the Twilight Zone and only gets more surprising from there. Stream now only on Shudder. Shudder is available for $4.99 a month or $49.99 with an annual membership. But our listeners can get a free month by entering the promo code SHOCK at checkout. Go to Shudder.com today and find the best selection of thriller, suspense, and horror anywhere available to stream.
Today's episode of Shockwaves is also sponsored by Diabolic DVD. Check them out online at www.diabolicdvd.com. They're the #1 source of horror, cult, and strange films from around the world. The company is Movie Buff owned and operated, and if you're looking for rare, unique, and strange films, then you need to head on over to Diabolic DVD. They're constantly updating their inventory and have plenty of movies that you won't find anywhere else. They recently revamped their website earlier this year, and ordering has never been easier.
The Shockwaves team absolutely loves Diabolic DVD, so head on over to Diabolic DVD now. You can also find them on Facebook.
Knoxville Horror Film Fest returns October 20th to 22nd for its 9th annual celebration of sinister cinema at Regal Cinemas Downtown West 8. Highlights of this year's fest include the 4K restoration of Suspiria, which I just saw and it's incredible, Blade of the Immortal, Better Watch Out, The Endless, which is also great, and a 40th anniversary of HOUSE screening.
House!
Which I'm totally jealous I am not seeing. That sounds amazing.
But the big twist to their screening, they will have one of the surviving cats who's still around 100 years later. In total, you can see 10 features over 30 shorts and witness the insanity of the Grindhouse Grindout filmmaking competition. Tickets and more can be found at knoxvillehorrorfest.com, and I'll be judging it, so I will get to see all these same movies too, so it's very exciting.
Okay, and welcome to episode 68 of Shockwaves. I'm one of your hosts, Rob G. I'm sitting with Elric Kane. What's up, my man?
Busy weekend, man.
Busy.
It's
Holy
been busy. This is October now. We're not messing around.
We're all in the thick of it.
This is real
also
deal
with
now.
us, Rebekah McKendry.
Hello, guys. How's it going?
Good. And yeah, we do have a lot to talk about. A lot of stuff going on in town. It's officially October. It's officially Halloween season. But just to start out, of course, if you're listening to this, you probably already know all this information, but we are all over social media. So please hit us up on Instagram, Twitter, on the Facebook. We also have the group on Facebook, and you can hit us up on iTunes, searching Shockwaves. Be sure to rate and review the show. It really does help. So,
and thank you for everyone who has. We've gotten some new ratings recently I saw, and they're awesome. So thank you guys so much.
Exactly. Humble thanks for that.
Yes.
And so we've got a lot of events that have been going on because it's October. The one that I want to talk about, because I know Elric, you went to Beyond Fest. So before we get to films, one of the most exciting things about Halloween season is everybody does some variation of either a haunt or a maze or some sort of interactive thing. It's kind of where people get to really let loose and have fun and be creative. And so there's a lot of stuff obviously in Los Angeles, but for me, I went to, and I'm trying to find my
Rob
tickets.
has
passes to all the stuff I went to. But I wanted to talk about Knott's Scary Farm. I usually do this every year. I try to do Universal Halloween Horror Nights, and I try to hit up the Haunted Hayride when I can. Those are the three big ones that are maze oriented. But I went opening night for Knott's Scary Farm, and I got to tell you, this was probably one of their best years yet.
Really?
Yeah, it was really, really fun. And I think it's because, I mean, I've always liked them. I've always considered them the underdog of the kind of haunt world, because, you know, as much as I enjoy Universal Halloween Horror Nights, they have the budget and backing to get all these name franchises.
And they've got studio titles already attached, so you can go through the entire Universal library and just like name which horror films you want.
Yeah, and that's super cool. I mean, especially if you want to look at something familiar, but I've always loved that because Knott's doesn't do that. They're all created by you know, their team there. John Cook, who has invited me the last several years to see things before they kind of went up and kind of get a feel for how they put on the show. I mean, it's really amazing. And when you really think about like the hundreds of thousands of people they employ just to pull off this stuff every year, it's quite impressive. And so that's what I liked about it, is all these mazes had kind of a homegrown quality to them. I went with John Humphreys, who I went with last year. He's the social media manager for Blumhouse.com when we were all working there. And we had a blast. There's one called Pumpkin Eater that was great because it felt like basically the texture of the inside of it looked like you were inside a pumpkin.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing. It's like Halloween. Cool. What's the Halloween one where the camera goes inside? Goes inside the pumpkin.
Yeah. So they had a whole maze of that, and it's got all this like pumpkin themes in it. There's like faces coming out of the inside of the pumpkin texture and stuff. And more importantly, all of them felt a little longer than I remember. It's just like, you know, because usually and I've said this about all of them, you have to get a front of the line pass. Yeah. There's no other way to do it, because if you end up waiting 1, 2, 3 hours for a 5-minute maze, it's kind of disappointing. Right. Mm-hmm. But if you have a front of the line pass, you wait maybe a minimum of 15 minutes, get in, get to enjoy it. And because of this, I think John and I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We did all 9 mazes and went to the 2 shows they had there before midnight. Like we hit it all out. And it was pretty terrific. They have another thing called Trick or Treat, which is that's kind of their stable trademark one, where you go into like a kind of like a very Halloween themed house. But what was cool about this year is that was one that was, they gave you flashlights to go in. And so it's kind of like the only light that you see in there is you and the other people you're with. And of course, I sensed it. I was like, you know, these are going to fail at some point in this phase, and we're going to be stuck in the dark. And sure enough, that was one of the fun gags that they did with it. But
I wonder how they do that. They make everybody's flashlight go out at once.
Maybe there's a sensor in a room or something. But there's a point where they start to fail you, and you're like, oh no, like putting you in that horror movie cliche. But that was great. The Tooth Fairy. There's one called Special Ops Infected, which is kind of for lack of a better term, like a laser tag in a zombie zone. So we had a lot of fun on all of them. Oh, Dark Ride was really great. But most importantly, we were there with Jim Coons for a little bit, who was a guest on our show a little while ago. And he had put together all the video for Elvira. Yeah. This is Elvira's last year ever. They're billing it like that. So this is your last chance to see her live show. Every year she always mixes it up. I mean, it's Elvira, so it's always quirky and funny, and there's kind of horror and boob jokes all in one. But I thought her show was exceptional this year. Part of it is the nostalgia. Like,
what does she do? Is it like stand-up kind of stuff?
No, it's more like a Vegas show, or at least last year it was, where it's like a singer and there's dancers and numbers, and she tells jokes. It feels very kind of Catskill.
She went to Groundling, so I always wonder if she would do like a full-on comedy act.
No, it's a little bit of everything. So there's a whole crew of dancers. There's a little bit of video element that goes into it. She'll come out and talk. She'll do songs. She'll with the synchronized dancers behind her. She'll come out and do sort of a little stand-up in between each segment. So, she just says a few things, and it's often her type of humor. And this one's all about like kind of all the years that she's done it. It's kind of it was definitely a nostalgia trip that, about the movie and all that kind of stuff. But it was great. And I mean, she still looks amazing, like amazing.
Every time I look at her, I just go, you had sex with Elvis. How cool
is that true?
Yeah, she did. She told us on one of our shows. She was very upfront about it.
Wow.
Elvis is the reason she moved to L.A. She was a Vegas showgirl, and he said, I mean, she's super young, and he said to her, like, intimately, he said, you should, head out to L.A. You can make it. And so she did.
So Elvis is responsible for Elvira.
Wow.
Literally.
She's also on the cover
How cool
of
is that?
She's on the cover of a Tom Waits album as a showgirl. Like before she was Elvira, like he took a picture of himself backstage with one of the showgirls, and
that one's the conspiracy, because I think it's her, and other people do online. She has no memory at all of ever meeting Tom Waits
I'd
or who he is.
always heard it was him.
There's this image of the cover, and it really does look like her from the time, and she's in the background, and she said it's, I guess, remotely possible if I didn't know who he was, because he wasn't famous.
Yeah, he was
one.
just like
that's like a third album or something. But she has lived one heck of a life.
So, do you think Elvira is a take on Elvis?
It might be.
Her name?
That would make sense.
Ooh, we just opened a whole can.
Well, she named.
Hey, we should get her on the show.
She named her son Elric in the.
Get out of here.
I think Jim might have even been. They'll have to validate that for me, but and it played by the guy from all of the Kaboom and all those movies, who plays her son in her like recent show, like the recent ones, and he's from the Terminator show.
Hulu.
That Terminator show. What's the Sarah Connor Chronicles?
Tom, what's his name? I know it. Decker.
Yeah. Thomas Decker.
Thomas Decker.
He comes in. Just look it up, because I'm 100% sure that, and I don't think it was because of meeting me. Like, I'm not taking credit. She might have already came up with the name, but I remember Jim Coons mentioning something like that.
That's pretty fun.
That's her new show that she was doing on Hulu.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well,
the show she was doing with Jim for DVDs, like they were putting it on.
It was, I think it ran on Hulu.
Elvira's Macabre.
Well. Yeah, movie Macabre. But yeah, it's, look, there's a lot of stuff to do in town, but I honestly, I recommend Knott. I think it was a lot of fun, and if anything, to see Elvira for the last time.
Oh, yeah.
And, what's cool is, obviously we have a very active, group of listeners, both on the Shockwaves group and on the Facebook page. I would love if people would share what their favorite haunt is closest to them, because obviously we only know the Los Angeles ones, but I know like New York's got a bunch of like more interactive stuff that, not the tension experience, but similar to that, that like Andrew Cash was talking about when he was on the show. But yeah, every town has these. So, share them with everybody.
Hayride.
Hayride's okay. It's pretty fun. I haven't done it this year. This year's theme is all clowns, which I'm already kind of like tired of people like doing like, the clown thing.
Clowns are. What about Six Flags? Because I live right next to that, but I have no idea what they do for Halloween.
I've never done that one.
Maybe we should investigate.
Yeah,
because I know they do something. I think out there.
Okay. What about you guys? What have you been doing this Halloween season thus far?
Excellent. Well, I caught up on a lot of television. I've really been excited because all my shows are back. And I just love when I like log into Hulu at night and I have stuff there and it's like, you have new episodes. So this week I watched the new Exorcist. Did you guys check it out?
No, I DVR'd it. I haven't had time.
Yeah, I got recorded.
Plus my TV died, so I didn't have time to, I couldn't watch it.
Then I won't talk about it yet. I will say that it kind of, it does not pick up exactly. It kind of creates a whole new scenario. And the two priests kind of relocate and you can tell that they're going to get involved. Some really creepy stuff.
The same character as everything.
Yeah, they cut ahead a little bit, you mean? Mm-hmm. Like it's like they cut a little further ahead from season one?
No, I mean like the Reagan character, they're not in there yet. Oh. So far, you're presented with a new, you meet a new group of people who are based, I think it's the Pacific Northwest, and it's a guy who runs a foster home, and you find out some creepy stuff that's going on there. And in the meantime, the priests are battling a demon in the Midwest somewhere. Okay. So far we have not.
But it is in the future of Reagan.
Yes, it's after because they're working together now. And so, but some really creepy stuff. I'm still kind of, on the fence about where it's going to go or if I'll like it as much as season one, because I loved the family in season one. Like it was the two sisters that like really pushed me through. So I'm excited to see what they do with it. But that said, really good use of Patsy Cline in the first episode. Wow. So I'm excited. I'm
just super happy they went with the second season, because I think that first one would have been pretty easy for executives to be like, it does okay. And the story kind of feels like we told it. Yeah. It'd be easy to wrap it up, but I think there really is more to be explored.
Well, now they have the ability to just open up that whole world and do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, and it's a two-person buddy show.
I hear rumors of references to Exorcist 3, although I don't know if that will play a prominent role or if it's just kind of fan
service. If they put Brad Dourif in there, I'd be so happy.
Has not come out yet in the first episode, but they are, you do spend the bulk of the first episode with the two priests, which is actually nice because they've developed a really nice kind of dynamic between like the more rough and tumble one and the more refined priest.
Yeah, so, I got to catch up.
Yeah. And then I also watched American Horror Story. Elric, have you been keeping up?
You're sticking with it, huh?
I am officially out.
Okay.
Out?
No,
Wow.
this-
How many episodes? 3, 4?
I think I know 2.
Okay. No, this episode was kind of my turning point because last week when I was watching it, I was at the, you can only do the, oh my God, is this really happening? Bit so many times.
I heard there's something
before
weird
I
with
just
a
don't care.
hamster, Dick said.
A hamster?
He said like a hamster in a microwave or something weird. I don't know. And like episode 3 said,
Oh, yeah,
it's the new
it's a
Jump the
guinea
Shark.
pig.
He said, okay.
It's a guinea
Wait, that's
pig.
the same thing as a hamster.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
No, it
What?
isn't.
A
A
guinea-
hamster is
That's
like,
what we call hamsters, guinea pigs, right?
no, guinea pigs are like the size of my dog.
Yeah, that's what a hamster is.
No, a hamster's really tiny like a mouse.
What are you, an entomologist? Oh, that's right.
That would be insects.
Yeah, I know.
But I actually, this episode really got into more of the cult angle. And the character that I had despised up to this point was Evan
Peters, yeah.
Peter's character with the blue hair. Like, I was so annoyed by him. In this episode, he really emerged as the cult leader, and I was almost riveted by it, where I was like, I'm intrigued. So I'm kind of back to watching.
If you get 2 good ones in a row, let me know. Because
Okay.
I'm not like out. I just haven't bothered. It's still on my DVR. I just, with that show, it's so easy not to push play.
Yeah.
And isn't that sad? It's just like one of the easiest things not to do now for me.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
This one, I liked this because you always, whenever there's cults in horror, the cult has already formed. It's always like, here's the cult. We're all cult people. We're doing weird, creepy cult stuff.
That's true,
and we
yeah.
love our cult. This is actually like the formation and the things he's going to recruit members. And it was kind of fascinating.
Well, and also in horror movies, especially, cults are 99.9% satanic.
Always.
So if it's a non-satanic
It
cult, I
isn't.
would be interested to know what. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's interesting to hear what is the cult. How is a cult something that's not like satanically based in
Yeah.
movies? Obviously, in real life, we have had lots of non-satanic.
Yeah, it doesn't function as a religion. It functions more as like a social thing. And so it's an immoral. And so, yeah, I'm in. I'll watch the new episode tonight and I'll report back and let you know if you need to rejoin the group here.
Okay. I saw a couple things. Do you want to start with the one we both saw?
Sure.
Mike Flanagan can do no wrong. Hush
agree with
was
that.
brilliant. Gerald's Game is a book that I read pretty much after he came on to talk to us about Hush at your house, because I hadn't read it. And I was like, I'm curious about that one. And then I loved it. And I also
loved the book.
Loved the book and thought it was
Wow.
probably impossible to adapt faithfully.
Right. See, I read it when it came out, but I think I didn't.
very
I
adult
thought it was
and dark.
okay, but I was too young to really appreciate that book.
It's grim, but it also
I
has
have to
these like
say the
super
same.
amazing, like, because it has this one, even though it sounds like it's just an A to B scenario for most people who aren't aware of it, there is actually a couple moments of, a creature type thing. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone, where I was like, I doubt they'll be able to pull that out, and it's just, this is one of the best adaptations I've seen of King's Right. It's right up there in the conversation of the great adaptations, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
And my feeling was powerfully, and this is why, I tweeted about it, is that it goes in line with those adaptations, that it can't be literal. You can adapt a thing, an idea, but you can't adapt all the beats and all the ideas in something, even as you're talking about the thing, it's impossible. What you do is you take this thing and you make it cinema. And his ability, some of the big choices he made with who she talks to, like how she communicates in this movie, because this is a very tricky thing to do. And they go so far against type on a few things. Like Bruce Greenwood is in the book is super overweight, super looks like the kind of he's meant to be kind of gross and looks like a heart attack waiting to happen. So then it happens. In this, it is totally different. Bruce Greenwood looks great, is chiseled, is like, you're like, oh, weird casting. And it actually threw me off for a few minutes. And I was like, oh, this is going to be really, he's new during this movie. And then what he does with the character is just 100 times more interesting.
Yep.
And I just think so many of his choices that were very creative cinematic choices, just like Kubrick with The Shining, because they might not be as faithful and they might make people, make some people upset, are just translating this thing that you read and put in your mind to something on a screen that we can all see. And a couple times maybe he's too faithful at the end. There's a couple beats where I'm like, oh, that maybe was a little too, too close to the book, that you could have gone a little broader. But he just was so, I think he was just so smart with how he told this story. And there's a tension, a brilliant performance by, I think Bruce Greenwood's excellent in this. I think Carla is incredible in it. And he didn't shy away from the really important parts of the victimhood of this character and her backstory, which a lot of us who read it would just think, you're not going to ever be able to do that. And he doesn't go as crazy, just like you can't have a gang rape in it. It's the same. He has to tone it down to an extent, but the implication is easily as strong and heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I think that's what fuels this story. It's a quite a powerful, emotional story.
Yeah, no, I mean, everything you said, I had a vague memory of it as a book when I first read it. So the movie to me far exceeded the book. Like I was like, wow, this is a great adaptation.
I think that's probably right.
And the things that I remembered about it stood out. And yeah, when you get to some of that stuff in the past, I mean, like Henry Thomas plays her father.
Yeah,
wow.
I thought when I saw Bruce Greenwood's name in the credits, I thought he was going to play her father. That would have made total sense.
But he's Gerald.
It's so cool to see somebody like as nice as Henry Thomas and low key. It just makes the whole thing.
Yeah. And so him doing what his thing in that is amazing. And, yeah, I loved it. I mean, I absolutely loved it. I thought also, to me, Flanagan, there's no doubt he's kind of like one of the masters of horror.
It's like right now his ability to direct in space between this and Hush.
Oh my God.
It's so incredible. He's able to take a small space and
you haven't seen Before I Wake yet.
No, yeah.
So I literally watched like all these back to back, which is
great.
Hush, the Ouija movie he did, which I thought was excellent. Before I Wake, and now this, and it's just like, man, he is kind of hitting his stride right now. And it's really fascinating to watch a film like this. And I've heard a lot. I've seen a lot of people post about it, and no spoilers because I know Beck hasn't gotten to it yet. But it has probably what will go down as the most cringeworthy sequence that we'll see all year.
I can't like a couple. So last year,
it's so horrific.
When I chewed my fingernails, unconsciously watching Green Room in the theater and realized I did it afterwards, I was like, I can't remember ever biting my nails. Same thing in this. I'm sitting at my house alone. That scene happens, which I had somehow forgotten from the book. Yeah. And I said out loud, "Oh my God! Oh my God!"
I remembered it, but I didn't think they would be able to do it. Like, I was like, how are you going to show that?
But also, that's where you get your kind of horror beats, and it really goes there, and that's when you know he's still a horror director. It's like,
absolutely.
But this is just a great adaptation, and I think it'll speak. I think it'll have some nice crossover appeal. And all I said only thing I'd say in passing, the only other person I think who could have done that, directing wise, was I thought to myself, David Cronenberg right after The Dead Zone, like peak Cronenberg could have tackled this adult stuff.
I don't even think it existed back then.
No, that's the funny. I don't remember when Gerald's. Yeah, it was probably early 90s.
Yeah.
But it's. I think it's one of the best. And when you say something is one of the best King adaptations, you're putting it in pretty nice kind of with nice neighbors up there.
Yeah. Hey, it's good to be the king right now.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's exciting for us to get to see so much of it. It makes me excited for his Shirley Jackson series for Netflix.
Oh, yeah. The whole thing.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited.
And she's back in it. The lead of Gerald's Game is in it.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah. Which I love that he Henry Thomas is in a Ouija. Yeah. I like that he's got his cast of people that he kind of
Flanagan's wife played the pregnant one. He used that pregnancy well.
Yeah.
Very smoothly done. But watch it for free. On the Netflix.
On the Netflix original.
Yeah. Nice.
What else you got, Becca?
I'll talk about something that we hadn't talked about yet. Did you guys check out the Mist TV show?
No, but I hear it's already been canceled.
I was scared off by somebody who hated.
That's what I hadn't seen it yet, and I saw it pop up on one of my services, and so I was like, I'll check this out. And man, it is bleak. Everyone is an asshole. Oh, wow. It's like with the first, with the movie, there were at least likable characters, and you were kind of like interested to see, what was actually happening. And the monsters, it's a lot more body horror. It's a lot more like your jaw gets ripped off, not so much like giant tentacle beasts and things like that. So I watched the first episode and was like really pushing myself through it. It was just bleak. Everybody just sucked. And then I found out the next day that they'd canceled it, and I was kind of like, oh, well, I won't keep going with it. But,
that's the question. Can you go forward with a show if you know it's canceled when you get, say, a first season, or you just can't even do it?
Because I started watching Life on Mars after I knew it had been canceled. And
Did it have a conclusion though?
No, it was so quick and dirty. It was just
I can't watch a show if I know it never got its conclusion.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, or Pushing Daisies I did as well.
The Mist is the sort of thing that if it popped up on Netflix or Amazon Prime, something that is easily accessible, I would give the season a watch.
Yeah.
Right. But that's the thing, nobody was talking about it. So I didn't hear
it was
anything.
On a weird channel.
It's on Spike.
Yeah, I remember when Ryan's dad was in town, he asked me about it because he's like, it's one of my favorite King books. Have you seen the show yet? I was like, no. And he's like, that's the thing. I haven't heard anything good or bad.
It really
And
tried to make it, for me at least, and granted, I have not watched The Walking Dead in several seasons, but it really did kind of feel like it was trying to set up that like lone band of survivors in the wilderness type setup where everyone has a really distinctive personality and they're all in conflict with each other, but no one was likable.
Yeah, the book, that story is, 45 pages or 85? It's a short story. It doesn't lend itself naturally to be an episodic thing to me. Like, it's. I think somebody could make another film adaptation and be quite different than the other film and make a really good movie out of it. Because that movie I like a lot in black and white, but just in that episodic it doesn't work for my mind, you know? Because it probably means it's just all going to be characters hanging out and talking about their problems and flashbacks. And
Which I question if that will do well now. If you can have kind of that roving band of survivors now, because we've become so kind of tainted with it from Walking Dead. Like, is that played out at this point?
Well, I never got to Under the Dome. I mean, is that any? They did, what, 3 seasons of that?
I was okay. I watched the first couple of episodes.
First season did very well, and then it kind of seemed like it tapered off. Again, I don't think it's, how do you sustain that forever? I mean, that's the best thing about it, because network TV, that's the problem with network TV. There's no end in sight. So, but the great thing about the other shows is if that was 12 episodes with a neat conclusion, maybe it's great. Same with The Mist, 12 episodes. I think this is why TV's in this golden age, but it's not really traditional TV that's in the golden age. We're talking about like limited series on HBO, Netflix, So
well, the one that I loved that was, I think, way ahead of this is I actually really like the Dead Zone series. And I think they did 5 or 6 seasons of it. Unfortunately, it didn't end with an appropriate ending. I think they knew they were canceled, but they still didn't wrap it up as nicely as they should have. But I remember that being like a really strong thing that lent itself to that kind of.
I saw a couple, but I don't think I ever saw like the origin, like how it started.
Yeah, I never saw the show.
Yeah, I've been meaning to. Yeah, it's 6 seasons. I've been meaning to just jump on Amazon and try to buy it because I think they're all on DVD and that's it. I don't know if you can get any other way. So I don't know. I may buy it. I kind of, because Dead Zone's one of my favorite of his stories. And one of my favorite movies. So I love that show, and it's like it was kind of before King became a TV thing.
Yeah.
So
I got another movie, but what else did you guys see?
I got a couple movies, but
well, I got one more, which I think a lot of our listeners probably watched this week, which was Cult of Chucky.
Nice.
I was very, very excited. I pre-ordered it, showed up Tuesday evening.
Wait, can you talk to the rumors? Some people are saying online that the Netflix version is cut.
That is my understanding.
Okay, so don't watch it there.
And so the unrated one is the way to go because, and I don't know the differences, and maybe somebody's already written an article about this, but in particular with the last film, Curse of Chucky, the unrated one had a post-credit scene which actually sets up this movie. And so if you don't watch that version, you kind of are a little lost, maybe. But what's fun about it, and here's the thing, I like Cult of Chucky a lot. It's really, really fascinating. It's really interesting. It's not one of my favorites of the series, but it's really, really good. And I had a lot of fun with it. And in particular, with this one and the last one with Curse of and Cult, it's like Mancini is really good at playing with our expectations. And he's been able to take kind of his love of thrillers and like the kind of asking the questions of what's going on. He's like mastered it. Meaning, for example, in this one, the character that actually it's Brad Dourif's daughter, Fiona, who plays Nika, and she's the survivor of the stuff that happened in Curse, is now in a mental institution because she has taken all the credit for all the murders and is convinced that she did it and blamed it on Chucky. And so, her very sleazy therapist or whatever he is, the doctor, like kind of brings a Chucky doll in for like, here, we're going to do this. And then one of the other patients is there because she had killed her child. And so she immediately picks up the doll and pretends it's her child. But then another doll shows up there, like mysteriously. And so there's like kind of a bunch of Chuckies, and you're like,
oh, weird.
What is going on here? Like, is one of them the real deal or whatever? And what it does is he is so good. What I love about this franchise, I think it's unique in the sense that Don Mancini is, and the producer David Kirshner, they're the only common thread for every entry. Like Don has wrote or co-written every single entry in the series, and each one is completely different from the last. And so I think it's the weirdest slasher franchise of all time because it's got that consistent, and yet he takes little elements and twists them in a way that's really fun and unpredictable. Like I couldn't predict where this movie was going to go, and yet the fan service is amazing. Like even elements he was telling us last week that he didn't like 3 that much, but there's a reference to 3 in it. Like, if you were a fan, you will pick up on references from all the, like, everything happened. They're not saying, no, seed didn't happen or this didn't happen. Like, they're,
and how tightly really connected, besides the actress, are the last 2? Like, feel like of a piece?
Yeah, they do, but I mean, you can watch the new one without the last one. I would recommend watching because it's a great setup.
I'm going back to, so we've been planning to do this for like months. We just haven't. I think we're going to start next week and go from start. So, and I don't do this as often as a lot of people do. So, because I've never seen Seed, and I don't remember 3 well, even though I've seen it, and then I haven't seen Cursed, but I wanted to see it for a while now. So, just going to do it in order.
Yeah, that's great.
Over
that's
like 2 nights, like try to do the whole shebang, and then watch
what's
these
fun
last
is
2.
When you marathon a franchise, normally you get to a point, a high number where you feel like you're watching the same thing again. You're not going to feel that here. Every one of them is going to be totally unique and distinct. That's cool. And again, the one of the lead characters of this movie is Alex Vincent, the little kid from 1 and 2. Oh. And so having him in this movie is really, really cool.
Oh, yeah, that's
and the way he ties them in, and basically, it was from the post-credit scene of the previous movie kind of set up him being involved again. And the way he uses them is, like, I could not have thought. I was like, wow, that's interesting. There's something really cool about his character and how we find him in this movie, and what his relationship is to Chucky now after all these years, after having such a traumatic experience. So personally, I loved it. It's a little, the one weird thing about it was Chucky's voice, not Brad Dourif's voice, because obviously Brad Dourif does Chucky, but the voice of the doll, which is like, hi, I'm Chucky, want to play? It sounds off. I don't know if they they didn't use whatever the dialogue tracks are from the other one. So it sounds like almost like they left in the temp version of by accident. Somebody was theorizing that it might be Don Mancini himself just doing the voice. So that threw me off a little, but still the rest of the movie is just a lot of fun. Okay. And again, if you have that box set, it's just a fun box.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, check it out.
It feels like the perfect kind of Halloween thing for me to jump into this year.
Yeah,
especially because there's ones I haven't seen, which makes it actually exciting.
Yeah, you're going to have a lot of fun with that.
So I don't throw around new auteurs very regularly. I can't really think. I mean, there's some really exciting directors, like the director of The Witch. That's exciting, but he'll have to make a couple more movies before we'll kind of know what his voice is. And obviously, Saulnier, I think, is like seems like one of those voices. But after Bone Tomahawk, you get your expectations up.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure what to expect with this one, a prison movie, which I'm a big fan of, grindhouse kind of prison film. And I was pretty hesitant with the idea of Vince Vaughn. I thought he's great in True Detective Season 2, even though the show wasn't very good. So S. Craig Zahler's new film, Brawl in Cell Block 99. Man, it's complete confirmation. His ability next to like Tarantino, and then we're talking a pretty big shadow when we talk about Tarantino, his ability to mix hilarious dialogue and mannerisms and character traits with then the most violent, fucked up shit I was at the Egyptian and I, like one of the early moves, I just like fucking leapt and everyone went crazy. And then it's one of the most violent movies I've ever seen. What I was worried was it was going to be like The Raid, where The Raid is cool on an aesthetic level. It really is energetically cool and the direction's phenomenal, but I don't get a lot out of those kind of movies because it's not about character or dialogue. This is 100% character. Vince Vaughn is like, this is like one of those transformations you see an actor get once in their career. This will be the only time. Well, he's about to work with him straight away. Mel Gibson and Vince are in the next one called Drag Me Over Concrete. If you're titled as Drag Me Over Concrete,
Dragged Across Concrete,
that's a great title. Something like that happens to someone's face in this movie,
some concrete
and it
involved.
Is not good. I mean, but it's basically this and he's so tall and he just fills it so physically. But it's basically about a guy who's kind of a bit of a loser, and he's married to Jennifer Carpenter. And I mean, loser is not a loser, but he's just like one of those guys who doesn't win in life. And he makes a conscious change to go, you know what? I don't want us to be struggling anymore, and our marriage is in a great place. And so he decides to run drugs for an old buddy, and suddenly they're very successful. So he like suddenly cuts to a year later, and they're doing great. And then he, something goes wrong. Obviously, I'm not going to. It's not a spoiler to say he ends up in jail because the whole movie is about this. But the concept is so obvious, is so clear, which is, hey, somebody gives Udo Kier comes to visit him in jail.
Who was in the Puppet Master movie, directed or written by the same guy and produced by Dallas Sonye.
But the cool thing is we don't get Udo in like he's either super campy or he's in a really piece of shit horror film. I can't even remember how many years it's been since he's been in an actual classy film and a kind of a classy, I mean, he's a bad guy, but he's plays like he gets to be a normal actor in it, and he gets to bring his Udo-ness to it. And he says, you're going to do something for us inside there, which is impossible. And otherwise something bad's going to happen to someone you care about. And so then literally Vince Vaughn just becomes a fucking machine and does some of the craziest shit you've ever seen. And you feel every blow. And that's the thing that Saulnier was able to achieve with Green Room. 99% of filmmakers can't do it. Evil Dead remake, I felt, did it, where I feel the blows. I feel if something bad, I feel that if someone gets hit, like, you're just like, oh, fuck. And you feel violence. And man, I want violence to feel violent because I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I don't want people thinking that it has no consequences.
Right. And I don't want it done to me either.
And this movie goes all the way. I'd say the only negative, and I'd say 90% of people were in. Some people felt maybe the start drags, but it's 130 minutes. I feel like and he films everything he writes pretty much. He probably could lose like 20 minutes, just for a mass audience. But for me, I'm totally on board with this. Like, I like his pacing. I like his comedy. He's a major talent. Even people who probably don't like this movie will probably see that because his writing is so good. And for a guy who, he's a novelist who just turned to directing. And what was so cool is how candid he is. He's like, I would much rather, if I could just write a book, I'll just do that, because who wants to go through all this pain and agony of making a movie? But I'll only do it if it really is going to be worth. Also, Don Johnson's fantastic as a warden, and not even particularly evil, just like a badass. But and Zahler was so honest that on stage somebody said to him, like, "Oh, what was the hardest thing?" He's like, "If I could bring 90% of my crew out right now, and I would pistol whip everyone. This is the worst shoot ever imaginable. My crew were terrible. Like, it was an indie film, and they were all dropping the ball, and all the actors were like agreeing. And he's just like, it was just, and you watching this movie, you would never know. You're like, but the movie's so perfect.
I can't believe he actually said that at a Q&A. No one would ever,
including his producer, is up there, is kind of nodding, going, they're a terrible crew because they're independent. He was an indie, and they just weren't paid. Like, from what he's saying, they're dropping the ball, not pulling their weight, and like he just said, it was a nightmare. But yet they pulled it off. So he's made two indies both with huge casts.
Unbelievable.
And so I'm excited for people, like film people, to see this. I will say, even though it's got Vince Vaughn, it's hard to imagine how that goes to a general public, because it's a long movie, it's an incredibly violent movie, and it's kind of a serious movie. So it's hard to know. But I don't think he's necessarily ever going to be as popular as Tarantino, but I think he's the first voice in a long time who has that dual talent,
Yeah.
It's exciting. But people are going to dig this. People who listen to our show are going to dig this movie.
Cool. I can't wait, because I find Bone Tomahawk mesmerizing.
It's brilliant.
Like, no matter how long it is, every time I watch it, I love everything.
And this is very similar. You have great dialogue and then violence that you're like shocks you, like truly shocks you. So this was really a fun time. And Vince Vaughn, man, take your hat off. There's a scene with him destroying a car, which is one of the best scenes I've ever, like, of emotional character scenes I've ever seen. You're just like, and it's him in a car. It's an inanimate object, and he's just going to town.
Wow.
So
cool.
It's fun.
Nice.
I might as well plow through, because I saw this was
this all
4K.
Beyond Fest.
So that was Beyond Fest. So all those actors were there. Vince Vaughn was like, I think it was ultimately its American premiere.
Yeah.
Unless it played at Fantastic.
It played at Fantasia. So
Fantasia.
Yeah,
Okay. So I think this was the North America. So a lot of the seats were actually for their people. And then Suspiria 4K on Sunday night was a little late for me, which I was a little bummed, because it meant a very late night. But, look, man, there won't surprise you. This film is never it's the best looking film you'll ever see. I mean, it's just unbelievable. The sound was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Dario was pretty quiet. I mean, he still did a bit of a Q&A with Mick, which was great. And Mick's obviously perfect to get like stuff out of Dario, because they know each other.
Yeah.
But, I think Dario's tired. This was his second screening of it in the day. So I missed the bigger Q&A that I think will be on Mick's show soon.
Yeah, Postmortem did it.
But live things are never the best for that. But you could tell he was also kind of proud. And somebody said secretly off camera, he had said Inferno's his better movie, but which is pretty hilarious.
I heard that, but I don't know if Lamberto Bava would agree.
No,
He did a lot of that movie too.
But seeing it again, like, was really rich. What's funny though, like, because it does look just mesmerizing. I saw Brad Grabinsky tweet later that night that he was like, even though this is the best looking thing I've ever seen, he's like, I can't help but, because then he watched the 35 the next day, I can't help but think the 35 is a little scarier. And I gotta admit, you never know with movies because you've seen them too many times. But a part of me thought, I wonder, I kind of agree. Like I watched it in a different way, but it's just sumptuous. So that's the version, no matter what, that should be on Blu-ray. Like that makes total sense.
Yeah.
But what I could understand is like sometimes we don't really watch films in both formats very often. And what it could be saying is what Tarantino's always been saying, which is, you know, look, there is something happening with film projection that is lost and you are losing those little black frames in between. And there is something subconscious about a film print. And I'm not going to go all in and say it's less scary because God knows. I'm just saying when I saw that tweet, I was like, yeah, he might have had something, because when I was sitting in the audience, I kind of did feel that way. But I was also just in awe of the imagery. And no matter what, if you get a chance, if you haven't seen it, you're the luckiest human on earth to get to see it that way. And it's exciting. I just can't wait for the Blu-ray, and it's, you know, just kind of everything. There was no real surprise. I mean, me and you had sat there. I don't think there was many big surprises except for how kind of great the sound was.
Yeah, because we didn't get to hear that.
No, it was just silent, and then the sound just sounds, you know, polished and so clean.
Well, I'll give you guys another little tease, Argento related. Second mention of the show, Jim Coons again. I was at his studio not too long ago, and as you know, he does a lot of restoration work for I saw on his, he showed me a little bit of Opera and the Sect. And
so the Sect's the other one.
The Sect, I can't wait to see.
And the Church.
And the Church are the three, okay.
And all three looked phenomenal.
And I believe they're going to Blu-ray.
They're going to Blu-ray. The Sect is so good. I talked about that a couple months back on this show, and it's just one of those films that like no one has seen. It's such a shame because it's such a tight little giallo film.
Jim found that one for me about a year ago. I hadn't seen it.
It's going to come out again, and he cleaned it all up, and there's not a single mark or line or anything anywhere on any of the, like, it looked amazing.
And that one's like genuinely scary. I mean, like there's some really terrifying stuff in that.
I think that there's a couple things. Opera's his best last film, so that's like his biggest train set. So people should be really excited for that one because we've never really seen that clean. But B, I think if people want to have a great viewing experience, put The Church in after Demons 1 and 2, and you'll see that really, it really is Demons 3. And seen like that, you'll really appreciate it because its tone is very close to Demons 1. Because Demons 2, you know, goes a little more comic at times. But it's, you know, because there's a terrible real Demons 3. But yeah, if you put The Church on with those two films, which is really how it was intended, I think you'll think that's amazing.
That's my plan.
Yeah,
when it comes out.
I'll do that with you because I've never seen them all like that, you know?
Yeah, it'd be a fun triple.
That would be really fun.
Anything else?
I saw one more, but I'll go after you.
Okay, I watched The Deep from 1977, which is the Peter Benchley one that followed Jaws, which for some reason I had always thought it was a horror film, and it is definitely kind of marketed as a horror film. It stars
Jacqueline Bisset?
Jacqueline Bisset and Nick Nolte. It also stars Robert Shaw is in it, and it also stars Louis Gossett Jr., who went on to star as the guy who owns SeaWorld in Jaws 3. Yeah. And it's definitely like I'd always thought of it as a horror film. It had been marketed as that, probably because it was the follow-up to Jaws. Not a horror film, but it does have some.
What is it then? A
cool trailer.
Yeah, it's a cool trailer. It's definitely more of like an actiony film. It's Nick Nolte and Jacqueline Bisset are vacationing in Bermuda, and they there's this giant storm, and they find two kind of relics. One of them is from this what they think is a sunken Spanish ship that's really ancient, and the other one is from a World War II ship, and it's a morphine like ampule. It's like a dose of morphine. And they start talking to some of the locals on the island and realize two things. That one, there is this sunken ship that has all this Spanish treasure in it. And two, that they knew that the World War II ship was there, but they'd always been told not to touch it because it contained explosives. But they now, some of the locals realize that it contains literally like thousands upon thousands upon thousands of vials of morphine, and that there's like a fortune in drugs down there. So then it kind of becomes this race to who can get the treasure. And this one guy's just after the morphine, but they know that if anybody gets close, the ship's going to explode and all this stuff. So there's a lot of like diving shark attack action. There's a really cool attack scene with a moray eel, which you just don't see a lot of moray eel horror. So I was in that.
I just forgot to write it down on my list, but you just reminded me of something else I saw based on I saw 47 Meters Down, but I forgot.
Doesn't that have a great jump scare?
Oh yeah, one was one of the best actually. Yeah. That was a full on.
Yeah, I screamed out loud in my living room.
It's a good like shift of focus kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a bad movie. It's not a great movie by any means, but it was like fairly. It's definitely not on level of Shallows in terms of like the character stuff. I didn't really care about them much. It's a hard one to have made because he's got them underwater. They're like literally at the bottom of the sea for the whole movie,
time,
and it's hard to like focus and see. And they've got tanks in their mouth, so you're not like that.
They can't talk that well.
You know, but there's a couple cool moments. You know, it has a kind of kind of a bad double end, unfortunately, that kind of takes out some of it. But I've got to say, like, for free, I would highly recommend it. Like,
yeah, I thought it was a blast.
You know, I enjoyed it on that level. It's like, yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, it's like what I said it last week, but you have to kind of let go of the very murderous, very vengeful sharks who would just refuse to go eat seals. These two scrawny girls in cages are much more interesting.
Plus, you have to be able to handle Matthew Modine as a ship captain.
Yeah, Matthew Modine as a ship captain.
He just looks too waspy for me to be in that role.
But that's it. It was a really fun movie. And I have to say, The Deep, even though that it is not, if you're going in expecting it to be a creature feature or something like Jaws, it isn't. It's still a lot of fun. It still has a lot of good terror films. And if you're into aquatic horrors like you don't want to miss it. It also, Donna Summer did the opening song to it.
Of course.
So, which is called like Down Deep Inside. So it's got like this groovy like disco soundtrack to it. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm going down deep inside.
Yeah.
One last little one that I want to highly recommend, only if you're like into these kind of movies. But I'd been avoiding this like the plague because I thought it was going to be another film. Just not that I don't love The Car, but I thought it was going to be like just The Car and Christine. Vinegar Syndrome. Have finally, guys, after last 3, you came through for me. The Hearse is awesome. If you like things like Haunting of Julia, movies like that, it's totally that. It's not up to that caliber, but it's totally that kind of movie, which I was not expecting. I was
expecting The Car.
Yeah, it's only the hearse itself comes in a few times, and it's like it kind of has a satanic kind of hearse driver that's kind of running around, but that's only like 10% of the movie. It's about this actress, Trish Van Devine. She has lost her like in a divorce, decides to go back to her aunt's house in the middle of some small town, and everyone's like, you shouldn't go up there, and that's like haunted or whatever. Joseph Cotton, who's very old by this point, is trying to tell her, oh, that should have been my house kind of thing. And you're like, what's going on in this town? It's a little over dramatic, the setup of her being up there, and everyone in the town kind of shuns her, and she doesn't understand why. And then creepy things in the house start happening. There's kind of a haunting kind of aspect to it, but then she meets this really smooth talking guy who she starts a relationship with. She discovers her aunt's diary, and it's almost kind of like that slowly, are you going to be taken over by this kind of, but it's a spooky house movie that just happens to have a hearse thing come in. So it's totally not what you probably think it is. And it also looked great. Vinegar Syndrome did a great job, has a really good conversation with the villain in the Elijah Drenner did a really good, like just a cool interview that tells you a lot. But what's interesting is the main actress, she was George C. Scott's wife. And the guy tells a hilarious story about having to do a love scene. He's like, I'm just thinking it's George C. Scott's wife. I can't, you know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of hilarious. But, and she was in Changeling with George C. Scott too. But, yeah, just a really nice little gem. It's like a little gem. Like I put it in that, like, oh, cool. It's not what you thought it was. And if you like those slow burn, atmospheric, moody little, late 70s, it's actually 1980 films. I think you'd like it.
Yeah.
I liked it a lot. And as I've said, I love Vinegar Syndrome, what they do. But the last couple I've watched, like Psycho Cop, that just didn't work for me at all. And so this was a nice to be like, oh, yes, good.
Yeah. I'm still waiting on a few from them that they promised me.
Oh. They listened
waiting a long time.
Oh, shit.
And Liquid Sky's coming out.
Oh gosh, I love
interesting
Liquid
timing.
Sky.
Yeah. Today I had a long conversation with the cinematographer
about Liquid Sky
because he works where I am, and I asked him about that. I said, "How soon is it coming?" He goes, "I doing color correction today. Yesterday I go in 8 hours and just do a few minutes." And because at one point he thought they were going to do it without him, he was all mad, but now they are. They're doing it the right way.
Oh, good.
And he's doing his work with them. So.
If you do enough Googling, you'll find a couple of like essay style love letters that I've written on Liquid Sky. I love that movie.
True story. Never seen it.
Are you
It's
serious?
really weird and bizarre.
It's so weird and bizarre. It's total New York art scene movie with like this weird European style to it. It's really
because the people who made it are European. So I'm really curious to see it now that I kind of have met him.
Yeah, it's the humor's weird. It's got all of this like weird heroin and there's rapes, but it's all kind of, I don't want to say comedically handled, but that's not the focus of the movie. So it's bizarre.
It's New York.
It's New York.
70s.
In the 70s, punk art scene through European eyes. Okay. It's just crazy, but I love that movie.
Now that one I'm actually really excited about. And I love that just even hearing him say how great they're treating the film, just like Suspiria and what Don May, and before I go on, like just Don May, if you do listen, thank you for the work you put in, because and what they're doing to opera too. Like we appreciate it, because what I realized watching that, what's really important is these are the final places these things will live. Mm-hmm. The reality is they'll be streaming, but but there will not be another physical media, in my opinion. I think this is the last major version of this we get. So if you do a half-ass job and you don't let the cinematographer be involved and you just do it the way, that might be how the films are remembered and might be a mistake. Yeah. So I think it's really cool that some companies are still able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Excellent.
All righty. Well, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back. So here's from our sponsors. Today's episode of Shockwaves is brought to you by Shudder. Brought to you by AMC Networks, Shudder is not only a premium streaming video service, but an experience unlike any other. Created for fans of all degrees of thriller, suspense, and horror, Shudder is home to the largest and fastest growing human-curated selection of high-quality, spine-tingling, and provocative films, TV series, and originals. And there's always something new and unexpected for Shudder members to explore. New this week is supernatural sci-fi series Missions, a new Shudder original. In a not-too-far distant future, an eccentric Swiss billionaire manages to launch the first civilian mission to Mars. After 10 months of space travel, the day before they land, the crew learns some bad news. They've been overtaken by their American competitors and their revolutionary technology. They will not be the first on Mars.
Once they arrive on Mars, they find that the American crew they expected to be greeting them is nowhere to be found. It's only later that they find a survivor, but he is not from the American mission. He is Russian, and he is the first man who died in space in 1967. Steeped in a space adventure mystery, human drama, time-shifting intrigue, and extraterrestrial threat, Missions is an engaging blend of thriller, science fiction, and horror. The series blasts off with a premise straight out of the Twilight Zone and only gets more surprising from there. Stream now only on Shudder. Shudder is available for $4.99 a month or $49.99 with an annual membership. But our listeners can get a free month by entering the promo code SHOCK at checkout. Go to Shudder.com today and find the best selection of thriller, suspense, and horror anywhere available to stream.
Today's episode of Shockwaves is also sponsored by Diabolic DVD. Check them out online at www.diabolicdvd.com. They're the #1 source of horror, cult, and strange films from around the world. The company is Movie Buff owned and operated, and if you're looking for rare, unique, and strange films, then you need to head on over to Diabolic DVD. They're constantly updating their inventory and have plenty of movies that you won't find anywhere else. They recently revamped their website earlier this year, and ordering has never been easier.
The Shockwaves team absolutely loves Diabolic DVD, so head on over to Diabolic DVD now. You can also find them on Facebook.
Knoxville Horror Film Fest returns October 20th to 22nd for its 9th annual celebration of sinister cinema at Regal Cinemas Downtown West 8. Highlights of this year's fest include the 4K restoration of Suspiria, which I just saw and it's incredible, Blade of the Immortal, Better Watch Out, The Endless, which is also great, and a 40th anniversary of HOUSE screening.
House!
Which I'm totally jealous I am not seeing. That sounds amazing.
But the big twist to their screening, they will have one of the surviving cats who's still around 100 years later. In total, you can see 10 features over 30 shorts and witness the insanity of the Grindhouse Grind-Out filmmaking competition. Tickets and more can be found at knoxvillehorrorfest.com, and I'll be judging it, so I will get to see all these same movies too, so it's very exciting.
Welcome back to Shockwaves. We are here with Kier-La Janisse. Did I say that? I tried. Yes. I really tried.
You didn't nail it.
I know. I've known her for years, and we work together at Fangoria, and we've generally run the horror scene together.
Run it?
No. I mean, like, we've run in the horror scene together for quite a while. So Kayla and I go way back to like Fango days. But yeah, she's like an author. You do a lot of film festival stuff. She's just a general
Elric's brought up her books quite a bit.
I've been talking since early Killer POV days, or to when the book came out, because I have this thing when my favorite books in horror are unfinished. Okay, so my two favorite, of course, #1 is Nightmare USA, which changed my life.
Unfinished, like you haven't.
I have not even finished Nightmare USA since it came out.
That thing is
because
dense.
of the way I read is I read until I haven't seen one of the movies, and then I have to put your book down until I see it. And when I got to House of Psychotic Woman, because you were doing the Cine Family screenings, and the first one I remember that I wasn't aware of was Full Circle. Went to see it there. I've been talking, he'll attest, I think I talked about it last week, Haunting of Julia.
Well, we actually talked about it earlier in the show, but you called it Haunting of Julia.
But that movie was one of the ones you mentioned that like I thought was brilliant, like just this really underrated. And just, I really love the way, so I think I'm like, 3/4, but there's just, I stop at certain chapters when I want to catch the work.
Yeah.
But I really think it's beautifully written, beautifully realized. I love the way it's, it's about you, but it's also in a broader sense about these movies and what movies mean to us. And I think it really connects, and it's just a great piece of work. So congrats on that. It's really cool.
And I've been reading your Satanic Panic book recently because I've been doing a big Satanic Panic project, which the listeners have been hearing kind of my ancillary research projects about. And that is a dense tome of everything. It's just awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't write that book, as you know.
You
so
edited.
It's like I co-edited it. And yeah, we just tried to put a team of writers together that could sort of tackle that subject from all different sort of pop culture angles, so everything from toys and games to talk shows to movies.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
A little bit of Smurfs in there.
Yeah. So it's sort of like between all of them, you get sort of a full picture of what that era was like.
So how did we always go back to the beginning? How did you first get started in horror? Like, what was kind of your first moment of like, I really love this
working
genre?
in horror or liking?
What's your impression of
your
it? Because for all of, I mean, look, if you're going to write books about these topics, then obviously it's hit on a deep level. Mm-hmm. And usually when you're young and seeing things for the first time, that's kind of when your mind gets blown by horror and why we become lifelong fans. So what was it for you early on that really had an impression on you?
Well, it was really like the first movie I saw, which was Horror Express.
Oh, cool.
And so, I mean, I write about this in my book, but it was, I saw that movie when I was very young. I would have been about 3. And I lived in Windsor, Ontario, where it was right across the river from Detroit, when they would have these Saturday afternoon creature features. And so that played, and I was at my grandmother's house and I saw it. And I found out later that I saw it on a black and white television, because in my nightmares, I would have nightmares about the character. I'm trying to remember the actor's name now. I can't remember his name, but he plays sort of like this Russian priest, on the train. And that character, he gets possessed and he has like glowing red eyes.
Yeah, that's
and in my dream, his eyes were always green. I always called him the man with green eyes, because I would have this recurring nightmare about him for about like the next 9 years. And but it was interesting because I was afraid of the dream. It was a nightmare. But after a while, I started to normalize the dream. So I started to sort of empathize with this character that lived in my closet and try to think that he had a backstory in some way. Or, it was like I just found myself sort of normalizing the monster in a way. And I feel like that ended up being like what I sort of always did with horror films as I got older and stuff, But that's sort of where it started. It was just like that movie scared the crap out of me. But I was sort of obsessed with them, and my mom was...
How soon after, though, did you become... when you say you became obsessed, like, did it take you a couple years, or was it like straight, wow?
It was pretty much instantly. And my mom and dad were both horror fans in different ways. So I had like a dad who, he really liked Hammer films and old AIP, like the Roger Corman type stuff. And my mom really liked more mainstream horror. So she liked like the ABC movie of the week type horror, and she liked Stephen King novels. And stuff like that, so it was like I was getting a bit of both, from both of them. But they really encouraged my interest. So when I expressed an interest in like monsters or vampires or anything, they would just like, my dad would buy me books at flea markets and stuff anytime he saw a book about a vampire or a magazine, horror magazine or something. So I was sort of lucky in that way that like a lot of other kids I knew weren't allowed to engage with horror stuff at all. And so I was lucky that my parents really encouraged it.
Yeah, often it's the act of rebellion or defiance or something. Unlike Ryan, our other co-host who's not here today, who had a dad who was very supportive too.
Yeah, my parents gave me any movies I wanted to watch. So I always had them kind of handed to me with kind of a disclaimer of, this isn't real, right? And that would be it. And then I would be off to watch it. So, yeah.
Did you have a first favorite horror film where something that you then repeated the watching? Like, so it became something like you ingested in a sense?
Probably Carrie.
Okay, yeah.
I would say that was a big one. It was like, I started reading really young too. So I'd read a lot of the books my mom read when she was done. I'd read them. So I read a lot of Stephen King novels early. I read Jaws really young. Like I shouldn't have even been able to read that level, when I read it. But, so Carrie definitely for a movie, because I totally related to the character. But yeah, just in mentioning that Jaws thing, it was kind of funny because I bought the book Jaws at a yard sale for 25 cents. And my mom said, okay, but I have to read it first to make sure that it's okay for you to read. And so she gave it back to me, and it was completely censored. It was like, so all the swear words were crossed out and she changed them into other words. So it would be like, that's golly, cool. You know?
Yeah. So the shark violence is okay, but the word shit, no.
Right. And the whole thing, there was like, apparently Hooper and Ellen Brody had an affair.
In the book, yeah.
Which I didn't know about till, 10 years ago or something, because my mom completely like
ripped
blacked out the whole pages of their extramarital affair.
Wow. I love this, that she took the time to censor it so that you could still get it, though. Yeah. That's really cool.
But all the violence was there. It was just anything about sex or swearing.
That's gone. So how did you ultimately transition your love of the genre into more writing style? Like, how did you progress to a writer?
Well, I feel like I was a bit late in that regard, actually, because I, especially when I look at kids now who are like 17 and have like their own amazing websites and stuff. But so I was just a movie fan, and I hung out with a couple other movie fan friends, and we would just do things like rent movies and camp out for the whole weekend, and we would just surround ourselves with mountains of chips and candies and things.
We still do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing's changed.
And we would just plan out like the schedule of everything we were going to watch, and so I did that like up till my mid-20s, and that was my only engagement with movies, was like that I was just a consumer of movies, and then how I started doing stuff proactively was really weird. I worked at this video store, and we worked right across the street from a movie theater. And then next to that was this cafe that was also sort of movie themed. And all the people from all the different places would meet after work and go for drinks there. And, one night everybody was drinking, and somebody said, we should start a magazine, like a neighborhood magazine, for everybody in the neighborhood could just chip into it and contribute. And I was the only one that was like, I'm not doing that. I have no interest in that at all. And so then the next Thursday came around. They said, next Thursday we'll all meet and we'll all have like a piece to contribute to this neighborhood zine. And it came around, and I was the only one that actually brought anything. Like everybody else was like, oh, you really did that? like, are we really doing that, And I was like, so I somehow got roped into like editing this thing, and it was really a mishmash. I mean, it was like weird hippie poetry and like just movie reviews and reviews of clothing or what. It was just random stuff of just all these people that lived in the neighborhood. And I ended up somehow paying for this to be printed. So I was like, not only did I not want to be involved in it, but I ended up being the main writer and the person that paid for it. So then after about 2 issues of that, and it was called, I got to name it even.
Nice.
So I named it Wombat Vengeance.
Wow, that is a total zine name.
Which is the name of,
makes sense
in the movie Rock and Roll High School Forever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
There's like a scene in the bathroom where they're trying to come up with a name for their band, and that is one of the rejected names.
Wow.
Deborah Brock. I love Deborah. She's the best.
But so,
and weird that you'd end up in Australia after a wombat reference.
Yeah.
How interesting.
But yeah, so that lasted a few issues, and then I just said, well, if I'm going to pay for this, I want it to be about horror movies. Like I don't want this poetry and stuff in it, So then I changed it. I called it Cannibal Culture. I started this fanzine. I'm actually pretty embarrassed of the fanzine now, because it's like I was in my late 20s, and it's just way below the level of where you should be in your late 20s, writing wise,
No, we all have those moments where you look back at the stuff that you wrote when you're younger and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that, or that it was that. And then you kind of, go, okay, I got better.
Yeah. Yeah, thankfully it got better. It was just awful. It was like every mistake that you make when you're that age and you just think you know everything. And so it's like a mix of like really pretentious mixed with like all the facts are wrong, because there was no internet and there was no way to check things, so it was just like random facts and they're all wrong. So yeah, it's just embarrassing. But so I worked at this video store and I did that fanzine, and, so a bunch of horror fans locally would come and buy it. And then one of them just started bugging me about how I reviewed all these films that I had mail ordered, but that you couldn't rent at the video store I worked at, because we have obligatory ratings in Canada. Every film has to be rated by the government. And so that doesn't happen unless there's a distributor who pays for that rating to be put into effect. So even though I can order all these movies for personal use or whatever, I can't technically put them out on the shelf in the video store. So I had like some readers who were like, oh, why don't you do something to get these movies shown locally? And I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know anything about that. So I just went to a local micro cinema. There was this cinema there that had 100 seats. And I said, hey, I got this list of movies, and if you show them, like, I can help promote it or whatever. So I gave the guy the list, and then I never heard from him again. And then about 6 months later or something, he called me and he's like, okay, I'm doing the calendar for June. And what dates did you want for your horror film festival? And I was like, I don't have a horror film festival. He was like, oh, I thought you came here with this list of movies that you wanted to show for your horror film festival. And I was like, he was like, you know, that you would rent the theater and do this. And I was like, well, how much is it to rent the theater? And he was like, $200. You know?
Oh my goodness.
And so I was like, okay, I'll rent the theater and I will do that. You know? But I was like, I had no idea what I was doing or how I was going to do it. I just was like, that's cheap, you know, to rent a theater. So, and I had just gotten my student loan too. It was $200 a night, not like for the whole time. But so I had just gotten my student loan. And so I used it to put on the first Cinema Muerte festival, which was my first festival. But I literally had no idea what I was doing, like, at all. So
do you remember what films were on that first?
Yeah. So the first year I played Deep Red.
Yeah.
Nice.
I had two guys walk out of that movie saying it was boring and not enough people died so far. They were just like, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
And Lizard in a Woman's Skin. So I played those together. I played Possession. I played Angst.
Oh, yeah.
Austrian film.
Oh, man.
That's together, those two together? Because I always thought that would be a
Possession and
crazy
Angst?
double.
I feel like they were on a double bill.
Oh, God, you could hardly
That's heavy.
breathe during
That's
that.
really heavy.
Angst, I feel like, is the one you can't take a breath while you watch that film.
Oh my
It's
gosh,
like
yeah.
insane.
That's still so relatively unknown and such a tight little film.
Yeah, until that, what's got a Blu-ray now here? Like,
Yeah. And I think I played Necromantic.
My goodness.
She's the good time girl.
Bunch of stuff. Yeah, and there was, like when I played Possession, I completely alienated the audience. Like at that time, it was weird because it was such a different time. It was before DVD. Like DVD was brand new, like that year. You know, it was like when DVDs of horror films first started coming out. So nobody knew what any of this stuff was at all. Like nobody knew who Dario Argento was.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it now. You think about people going to see Goblin. Like everybody goes to see Goblin.
It's like,
I just went to Suspiria 4K and everyone's there.
Yeah.
Everyone knows about it. It's great.
Yeah, it's just like such a weird thing. Like when I was in high school, I was like the weirdo who liked those weird foreign movies, you know?
Yeah, I remember being like the only one in my college who would ever, heard of anything like that. And now when I mention it to my students, a lot of them are like, oh, we know Dario Argento. And I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, he's a classic.
Yeah, to be cool now, you have to be Umberto Lenzi. That's the only way to be edgy now. Like, I'm a Lenzi fan.
Lenzi.
Way cooler.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's how it started. It was just sort of all accident.
Nice. And then how did that transition into books? Was your first book House of Psychotic Women? Had you done one before that?
My first book was called A Violent Professional, and it was about an Italian actor named Luciano Rossi. So it's like he's like a character actor that would be in things for like 5 minutes and then get killed. And he often wouldn't be credited, or he'd be credited with different names. And I sort of became obsessed with him because I would watch these Italian crime films and stuff with my friend Sam. And I would notice that this guy was in so many of these films, but nobody knew who he was. Mm-hmm. And so eventually I figured out that his name was Luciano Rossi by cross-referencing a lot of things. But again, like there was no internet entry for him on IMDb or anything. And IMDb was pretty new then still. So it was like kind of sparsely populated, you know, when it came to that kind of stuff. And so it was actually pretty hard to put that book together and try to track down all of his films and try to find out anything about him.
Did you actually find him?
No, well, I found him and he had died 5 months before.
Oh no.
So I finally found like a family member, and they said that he had just died, and they said that he died alone with like 5 cats, and he thought nobody cared about his films. And he was like, it was like his nephew that I'd found, and he was like, oh my God, if he knew that like some girl was writing a book about him like across the ocean, you know, like he would have been so happy, but he just like died thinking that like no one cared about him anymore, and his old movie friends, no one ever visited him or anything. yeah, so he just died like all heartbroken.
Oh my gosh. Well, at least your book immortalizes him a
Yeah.
bit. That's great.
How are there lots of inaccurate, like, because I imagine when you write something before the internet and access to information, were there lots of problems or things that you went back, or was it pretty
I never went
solid?
back.
Okay. Probably the smart
We're
way.
looking back, Elric.
I was like, I did what I did. And it's like if other scholars are
Other Rossi scholars want to come to
expand upon it, great,
Yeah.
Wow. So how did that become House of Psychotic Women? Like, what was the transition between the two?
It was the publisher that did the Rossi book was Fab Press in the UK.
Which is a great company.
Yeah.
All the thrower stuff.
And so I had Harvey Fenton, who runs that company, he would always go to film festivals and stuff that I was at because he would always have like a table selling books and stuff. And so we started talking about, or I pitched him this sort of idea of doing that book. But at the time, it wasn't going to be personal. It was just going to be about the films. Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh, yeah, I like that idea, a book about all these crazy women in movies. Mm-hmm. And, but it took a while. It took like 10 years before I actually had a manuscript to give him. And by then it had gone through so many permutations. It was like, I kept losing faith in it. It was sort of like, the internet exploded. And so suddenly there was all this great writing on the internet, like covering all these obscure movies. So I started thinking, well, what is the point of even doing this? Because like the movies are not obscure anymore. And it's like everybody knows them all now. And, so I just thought, me writing reviews wasn't going to have any meaning. And, and then at some point I thought of co-writing it with my dad, who was a psychologist.
Ah, interesting.
And he was not interested in that. And then so eventually it was like a couple of friends of mine who were saying that, you should write about it from a personal perspective. And I always hate when people tell me to do that because I'm just like, well, I don't want to be one of those like self-indulgent people that just makes it all about me. And, but I decided I would try it, and I started writing like that. And I found that then it just was like, it just came out like really fast, really easily. And, so it was like, I'd gone through this period of almost 10 years of like painstakingly, just slowly working on it. And then all of a sudden, when I decided to write about it from a personal perspective, all of a sudden all the connections became really visible and the patterns became really apparent. And, it just like it all clicked for some reason. But I was still worried that like no one was going to want to read that, So I gave it to Harvey, the publisher, and luckily he really liked it.
Yeah, it's led me to a number of films. Like I'd never seen De Palma's Sisters before reading that book, and then was suddenly like, okay, well, I have to check this one out.
Yeah, I hadn't seen Let's Scare Jessica Today, even though I knew about it. I just hadn't seen it yet. And then when I read about that, it's become one of my favorite movies. Actually, I love it. It's such a haunting little film. But I think that's the thing. You're doing what some bloggers were starting to do. That makes sense. That your voice had to change. That had to become part of the narrative to be worth them reading them.
Right.
If somebody just reviewing something online isn't necessarily enough now to go do it. You want to hear their perspective, not just a review. And I think that connects kind of well to where your book hit. But you also launched it here in a really great way with the Cinefamily screenings here. Can you talk about how that came together and maybe color it a little for people?
Yeah, it was a pretty
great lineup.
It was funny how that happened too, because it was like the book came out in July of 2012. That was when it first premiered at Fantasia. And then so around that time, I started bugging Hadrian at Cinefamily to, be like, well, I have this new book. Like, what do you guys want to do? And I was just pitching like a screening, just one screening, and I'll come and, introduce it or something. And he was like, oh, yeah, maybe, we'll see. And he just would never get back to me about it. And then finally it was like late January. And I was going to be going to San Francisco in February. And so I just emailed him again and said, oh, just so you know, I'm going to be going to San Francisco in February. So I thought I'd touch base again and see if, you want me to come down to LA and do something. It might be a good time for me to do it. He's like, oh, we're doing a whole month of films from it. And I was like, you are? When? And he's like, in February, next month. Like it was just like 2 weeks later.
Why don't you know?
And I was like, what? And so he was like, oh yeah, I didn't tell you. And I was like, no.
Oh my gosh.
So they had planned the whole thing and no one told me. It was just like, luckily I had emailed him. and found out, but by then I already had my tickets to San Francisco. And so I was only able to be there for part of it. Otherwise I would have just been there the whole time.
Of course,
the lineup was amazing. And they had like all these rare film prints and they had directors in person and stuff. Like,
what was the one with Robert Mitchum and Liz Taylor?
Oh, Secret Ceremony.
That one was great. So that and Honig Julian, Secret Ceremony, I'd never heard of it. And it was great.
I'm writing it
That was
down
a
right now. I've never heard of it.
Fascinating movie.
I've been to I've been yelled at by the person who owns the house in that movie.
Weird. See, I've been yelled at by Robert Mitchum's bad beard in that movie. He has this terrible stick-on Amish beard, which Mitchum is not a beard guy. Like Mitchum's one of the few people who always look better clean-shaven.
Yeah.
But it's pretty fascinating. Well, and obviously Cinefamily has gone through a lot lately, and I remember you were the first person who came into my mind, and I mean that very sincerely. I remember just thinking, I'd love to see it come back with you as a programmer of some kind, because I do think
he said this to us.
Right. I tweeted at you, right?
Yeah.
But I mean it as a compliment, because I think, I don't want to say we have a lack of woman programmers out there. Maybe there is. I don't know enough about it.
I would venture to say that.
But that's not why. That's the thing. I'm not interested necessarily in the politic. It's more like having someone with a really unique sensibility and actually with kind of the depth of knowledge is what's important.
And a real understanding of international films as well. Like that's one of the things I always loved about when we were working together at Fangoria is it wasn't just, let's talk about the Chuckies and the Jasons. Like you got weird European stuff, like your Jean Rollin stuff. And you actually have a book coming on that as well?
Yeah, that's a book I've published. So I didn't write it. So it's edited by someone else. It's edited by Sam Deegan from Diabolique.
Nice.
Magazine and website. Mm-hmm. So she put together a team of all women film historians, critics to do essays about the films of Jean Rollin. And so that book has just come out.
Did you write any essay in it?
I just wrote the afterword.
Okay.
So
are you a big Rollin fan?
Yeah, I am. But it's interesting because I had never delved that much into, his references and the meaning behind his films a lot. And so in a sense, I found it sort of daunting to the idea of writing an essay about one of his films. And so I opted to write the afterword, partially because I was doing the layout on the book and I just knew I wasn't going to have time to really do the proper work to write a real chapter. But also I knew Jean Rollin a little bit. And so it was so that way we could end the book on a slightly personal note.
Oh, well, when did he die?
2010.
Oh, see, I would have thought it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, so did I. In my mind, he's been gone for a while. So
because his films they're kind of otherworldly. I feel like in their setting, they feel like they're set in a very different. It's almost your Transylvania type vibe, but it's in France, and it's what I mean.
It feels fantastical. So everything that I've seen of his, even though that it might be in modern time, it always feels kind of medieval, almost fairy tale like. And so it's hard to gauge the time. So I always feel like they came far earlier than they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that quality about his films, the fairy tale quality, is a big theme in the book. Mm-hmm. It's called Lost Girls. The book is sort of called that because of its relationship to the idea of these girls lost in the woods, which is something really common in fairy tales, and it's something really common in his films.
Did the writers personalize their experience with Rollin, or are they more analyzing his films?
They're more analyzing his films. Yeah, so it's so some of them do one movie, some of them do a couple movies that are tied thematically. Sam Deegan does this great chapter all about his work for hire and his porno films. And I don't know if you've ever seen any of his porno films, but it's even his porno films have amazing production design, so it's
really?
They're it's just not production design in the sense of they don't all have amazing costumes or anything, but he just really knows how to pick locations. Mm-hmm. He's really great with locations. So it's even his porno films are full of castles and
that's all I can anyway.
I look for castles.
Every time I look at porn, I'm just looking at a location.
Does it have a castle in it? I'm in. I'm totally in.
Yeah.
If you're I think this would be a good access point for people, because I think we probably, even though we have a lot of real horror fans, I bet a lot of them haven't seen a Rollin film yet. Right. If you were because I remember, what was the company who put all the blues? Was it Kino?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I got 10 of them given to me way back, and I'm still probably watching about half of them. But what would you say the good first, would it be Fascination? What would be the first one you'd recommend someone to try to make them get into Rollin?
I often tell people Shiver of the Vampires or Le Frisson des Vampires, just because I just find that one really accessible, you know, for a person who's just coming to his films for the first time. It's kind of funny, it's got the funny cousins in it. It's You know, it's got a lot of his trademarks. You know, it's got like a really cool looking castle, and it's got vampires, and it's got weird countercultural themes to it. It's got feminism. It's got, you know, it's just got like all these things, but it's not super dense in terms of like the dialogue, or, you know, it's not intimidating. Like some of his other films, the dialogue is just very poetic, you know,
and it moves like what is normally 10 minutes worth of time will take about 60 minutes to traverse on film. Yeah. That's always.
There's some imagery in some of them, like Lips of Blood has imagery with the twins and the butcher. They're in that kind of like butchery thing. That will really stick with you. But then if you ask me to recount the plot, I'd be like, I don't remember.
That's how a lot of the films are for me, where it's almost like a daydream. A lot of his films function like that, where like I can watch it and I can be mesmerized and be stuck in it. And as soon as it ends, if you ask me what it's about, I'm like, there was some females in it. They were kind of cute and
some females.
Yeah.
What was he?
They were female.
I mean, I'm sure I can read the back of your book to find out, but afterward. But I'm also curious what he was like as a person, in the way that, because he didn't have that chance to have that relationship with Rossi that you just mentioned. You know, he didn't find out. What was that like for you to know someone like Rollin at the later part of their life, I assume?
Well, he was. Yeah, I mean, like I brought him over to my festival, Cinema in the second year, and I remember we had 50 people. We did a screening of, I think it was Fascination, and there was only 50 people there. And I was just dying. I was just so embarrassed. And I was just like, you know, I knew it was a risk. I knew that a lot of people just didn't know Jean Rollin's films or just didn't like them, you know. But so anyway, so he was in the lobby, and I had just run in to check how many people were in there. And I came out and I was just like, ugh. And then so we had to go do the introduction, and he did the intro and then came out, and he was just beaming. He was like, I can't believe you got so many people to see my movie.
That's so great.
And I was just like,
that
really?
makes me so sad for him.
Yeah, I know. He was just like, I never get that many people to see my movies,
great.
you know?
Oh, that's sweet though.
That's pretty crazy. What did he speak English, or are you speaking French?
Yeah, he spoke English, but he didn't speak very good English, or he wasn't confident with his English. I think that's a lot of times when people don't speak English, really they're just not confident, so they don't want to try. But yeah, so he could speak English enough to communicate with me, and also his wife Simone was there, and she was more fluent in English, so she also would sort of help translate for things too.
Did his guy, I don't know anything about the kind of tour, you know, when any of these directors just stop making films, I'm always curious, did it stop because, you know, no one was seeing the films? Did the financing stop? Did he get too old to make movies? How did
he never stopped making films? So he literally made a film, like he died like I think 2 months after he finished his last film.
Oh my God.
That makes me happy.
Were they still doing commercially well, or
no? No, I mean his last couple of films were on video, and both of them seem like a last film. Like he had the one film that was called La Nuit des Horloges, The Night of the Clocks. And that was like 2000 and I don't know, I want to say 2009 or something, but I can't totally remember. And that felt very much like a final statement from a director. But then he didn't die, you know, so he was actually sick for a long time. He had kidney dialysis. Like even when he was at my festival, he was getting kidney dialysis every 2 days. Wow. And then eventually he had a kidney transplant. And so he thought he was going to die, like a lot of, you know, for the last 10 years of his life, at least. And then he finally made his last film, which was called Le Masque de la Méduse, The Mask of the Medusa. And so that was 2010. So that was like the year that he died. And that felt even more like a final film than the other one, because it was like it had his wife Simone in it playing like a main character. At one point she's decapitated and he's like holding her head and stuff like that. Oh, wow. And there's this sort of tribute to the Grand Guignol cinema and the actors of the Grand Guignol, and a bunch of people that he had worked with throughout his career are in it. And it's really beautiful. Like it's not the most, you know, obviously if you like film, you can tell it's video, so it just looks cheaper. But it's still just a really beautiful film, you know?
Yeah, it's a good way to go out on. Yeah. That's sad. Yeah, he's somebody I want to explore even more of his films, but I do feel like you need sometimes context of what they were trying to do.
I feel like with him, you really do, you know? And I think like in the new book, the Jean Rollin book, that's like a big part of what, like they talk about all his literary references and all of his cinematic references, his like, visual arts references, comic books, like everything that he, was inspired by.
See, I never got any of this texture. I've seen a number of his films, but never understood that there was any type of like dynamic nature to them where they had stuff going on behind the scenes.
I've told these guys, but I think you'll get a kick out of this, and they might not even remember that, I watched so much horror as a young person, but at about 13 or so in the video store, I was like almost kindergarten. I was too scared to rent the Redemption box covers. There's something about the art and the way it looked like renting some sort of like explicit bad devil porno. And I just stayed the fuck away from them. And I didn't see it till I was like, 30, because there's something about whatever they were doing with the advertising of his movies with that black and white logo and the black and white and the erotic art. I just, for some reason, I was actually scared to rent it. I didn't know what it was.
I wasn't scared to rent it, but it was not appealing to me.
It's a weird, it almost looked like necromantic or something to me. Which
I always really liked that logo. Like that was,
You're a total creep.
I know I am. I know. No, well, as soon as you say like bad satanic, sex, I'm
that's true. You're in.
I'm
You got back.
Watch it now. So there we go. So.
That's right. Well, what about because I've heard the one I don't know anything about is your Christmas horror.
Yeah, which is coming up soon.
Yeah.
Which everyone loves. So, I mean, everyone loves Christmas horror. Like we have had so many guests or friends say, "Oh, I love Christmas horror movies."
Yeah.
So I can't. What is the content? What is
I'm
it?
a little partial myself. So.
Well, it's a book there's about 26 different chapters in it that go in depth on certain films, certain themes, things, and there's some interviews and stuff like that. And then there's the compendium section that has like about 200 Christmas horror films covered in sort of capsule review form.
There are 200?
Okay, here's the test. Do you have Blood Beat?
Yes.
Oh my God, you've just passed the ultimate test.
Do you have Iced?
I've never heard of
Actually,
it.
somebody was just talking to me about Iced the other day because we didn't have it on the list, but then it may have been Amanda Reyes who
So it's a
mentioned
TV
it to
movie,
me.
maybe, if it's Amanda.
I don't know.
No, Iced. It was. It's a ski resort slasher, and it's really.
But
It's
is that
Definitely brought
Christmas?
that up.
I don't remember. I know it's set Christmas time. There's a whole bunch of snowman stuff, so I'm inclined to say it's Christmassy.
Right.
So
I'm
Iced.
so
Yes, it has
disappointed in this
definitely
book
come
now.
up. And then I feel somehow that I met like the producer of that movie this week.
Wow.
I feel like I have met the,
He's
I don't
hanging
know.
out at Beyond
It's
Fest.
Yeah, it's come up though.
Let's stick with favorite Christmas horror for you, because I want to know if you like, especially if there's something off the beaten track, or what are some of the ones that you actually really appreciate, like genuinely?
I mean, my favorite one is Black Christmas,
Yeah.
but I think that's
It's one of the best slashers, right?
everybody's.
Yeah, period. But are there any other like weird ones that you just have a fondness? And do you actually like them, or is it more like interesting to you, like then love them? Some
No,
people
I
it's more
actually. I don't know if I would say I love them all, because they're, obviously we've covered 200. There's a lot of
There's a
bad,
lot of
really
terrible
bad
stuff.
ones. But I do love the idea of Christmas horror,
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things like Lovecraftian horror, where there's a million Lovecraft movies and there's a lot of Lovecraft movies that are not quite satisfactory, but it's enough there that people keep trying and keep wanting to make that their contribution to that genre. Or
Does it all start with Gremlins? That interest for all of us, you think? Like, because that was kind of horror and it's kind of Christmas, and do you think we all kind of?
I mean, for American or North American kids, I don't know. I mean, because I feel like I knew about Black Christmas before I knew about Gremlins.
Yeah,
because
like-
I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
So I feel like I knew about Black Christmas first. And then for British kids, obviously their Christmas is completely different. And this was like a hard thing to manage for the book, is like all the British Christmas programming has nothing to do with Christmas.
Oh yeah.
But we had to include it because to all the British people, those are the Christmas movies, because they have a tradition of Christmas horror broadcasting where they'll have original horror films that are made for Christmas, but they're not set at Christmas.
What's an example of one?
Like all the Ghost Stories for Christmas series. None of those stories take place at Christmas. There's like The Stone Tape.
Yeah, that's a good.
Was a Christmas horror movie.
TV,
that has
they're made for
nothing to do with
TV, right?
Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah, BBC.
Yeah, so it was like a broadcasting tradition.
Yeah.
So it was like the
I didn't know that.
Christmas
That's what
horror
for.
tradition. There was always new horror.
Do you
content.
detail that in the book?
Yeah,
That's
and we
cool.
actually have a chapter from a scholar named Derek Johnston who talks about why does that Christmas horror tradition exist in England that doesn't have anything to do with Christmas, and it goes back like centuries, where it was like where Christmas was always the scary time of year in England, not Halloween. You know, so it was like when they make their scary episodes of things, it's at Christmas, not at Halloween.
Wow, that's cool.
Interesting. I wonder what that's about.
Yeah.
That's unusual. I didn't know
It's
that.
just, I mean, it goes back. He pulls up old quotes from like Shakespeare and old folk tales and all kinds of stuff where they talk about telling Yuletide, like terror tales around the fire and stuff like this. And he's like, it's like a really old tradition. So it's
how
like,
that connects to the Scrooge myth and everything. You know?
yeah.
Yeah, you're right, actually.
I guess that would make sense.
So yeah, so A Christmas Carol was part of that long run, you know, it was already a long running tradition by that point, but that just became the most, like the sort of big touchstone, cultural touchstone for a lot of people was Christmas Carol.
That's the weird thing about coming from New Zealand, and you've just been in Australia, is that like our people always forget this, but our Christmas is hot as it's the middle of our summer. So we are literally swimming at Christmas, and we don't have. So when we watch, you know, your Christmas movies, we get excited because it looks like what we want Christmas to be like. But there recently was an Australian with what's her name from Cujo? What's it called? Red Christmas.
Red Christmas.
So I mean, there are some, but it's there. I haven't seen a lot of Christmas films from down under.
There's a New Zealand one in the book.
Oh, really?
That's but it's in the kids section. It's called A Monsters Christmas.
I don't know that one.
It's only in there because there's monsters in it. But it's like for kids. So we have like a little section that's like kids stuff where it's got like Santa Claus, the Rene Cardona movie, and some stuff like that. But yeah, Monsters Christmas is like a New Zealand movie that was made for New Zealand television in like 1981 about a little girl that wakes up and these monsters have lost their voices because this evil witch has stolen their voices, and she has to go on this like journey to try to get their voices back.
Is it on YouTube?
Yeah, I think so.
I bet you I'll watch it and it'll give me some weird trigger, like where I don't even remember it, like where I would have seen it as a kid. Because that's the thing; those things. New Zealand had 2 channels growing up, you know, until I was like 10. So whatever was on 2, that's really interesting. Though. But yeah, I do find. I think Christmas. Well, we're all kind of obsessed by holiday horror in general. Oh yeah, you know, all the holidays. Thanksgiving, we're all so excited about Blood Rage.
Yeah,
when we finally saw Blood Rage.
I don't know what it is about the horror fan that's just like it's a holiday. You want to see those holiday.
Yeah, you want to see the holiday skewered.
Yeah, I think it's like that. I like to. You know, it's something that's so standard. I want to see a horrific approach on it. It was like I got so excited when I saw like how Easter could be completely demented in the holidays.
Yeah, that was pretty freaky.
That was so disturbing. But I was so like, yes, if you're going to do Easter.
Was that Nicholas McCarthy's?
That was. It was his one. Yeah, I liked an Irish one in there. The St. Patrick's Day was fascinating. It was like, what is this? Like, it was crazy.
Yeah, that's what I like. I'm just like, dement it, please. Yeah.
What's the title of this book, and what's the status of it as of right now?
It's called Yuletide Terror, Christmas horror on film and television. And it is in production, like it's in layout right now. So I'm like, I literally bought
for Christmas? Will it be for Christmas?
Yeah, for this Christmas.
Oh, that's cool.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so I'm like down here, like part of what I'm in LA for is to do a research trip. So part of it is to like scour for pictures. And then also do interviews for some other books I'm doing.
And you introduced a Jean Rollin film at Beyond Fest a couple of days ago, which I was really bummed because I haven't seen that one. I wanted to go and I couldn't. Which one was that? Grapes of
Death.
Which is probably Grapes of Death is probably one of my favorites because it definitely involves more kind of environmental tones, and it seems I don't want to say a bit plotty because it makes it sound bad, but it seems to be that's one that I consider accessible just because it does have kind of a more like end game. It doesn't feel as meandering as some of his films. Yeah. So.
Did it go over well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I sold a lot of books, so
that's awesome.
So Jean would have been happy to have seen that many people in the room.
Totally, because there was more than
the 50.
Than 50. Yeah, there was like the room was full, and it fits like 90 people or something.
That's awesome.
So what happens to you now? Because I know, because I'm friends with Bill Ackerman, who you were on his show Supporting Characters. That's how I first heard like a long format. But it was a terrible recording because you were in like on Skype in Tasmania. But like I find what's interesting, you went from Canada and then you got to spend a couple years in Tasmania, and then now you're back here. What's your big kind of thing coming back to? What are you trying to work on? Or besides, obviously, once the books are all out?
Well, I'm in Toronto right now. I've moved there, for at least a year anyway, because I'm trying to get up this TV show version of House of Psychotic Women.
Oh, cool.
So I'm like, we're trying to get development money for it. And the writer that I would be working with lives in Toronto. So that was sort of why I went there.
A fictional show or a autobiography show?
Yeah, it's a narrative
show.
So it's kind of like, it works kind of the opposite way as the book, So the book is a book of film analysis, but it has these personal stories that sort of underscore everything. And the show is kind of the opposite, where it's set in the late 80s in Winnipeg, and it follows this girl that's in the child welfare system that's based on me. And then each episode has a different horror film that's like aligned with it thematically and through production design and stuff like that.
Would that be hard rights-wise, or would you just have to find?
No, it's not. We're not using clips.
Okay. Oh, wow. So you're just referencing
It's just woven into the whole production design of the episode and stuff.
That's fun.
Cool.
And through the story and everything.
Nice.
Oh, I hope that happens.
Yeah, I'm anxious to see that. And so do you have any more screenings while you're here for Beyond Fest?
I don't have any that I'm doing, like I'm introducing or anything like that. Although I am really excited about going to the Walter Hill thing.
Oh
my gosh, yeah.
Driver and Baby Driver. That's pretty amazing. Yeah, that's solid.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
Yeah,
is there a place that our fans can find you online too?
Yeah, if they want to go to the website, my company is called Spectacular Optical. That's the book company that I run. And so it's spectacularoptical.ca.
Excellent.
And is the Roll-On book out now?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, people can order it there.
And Yuletide Terror on the way at Christmas time.
People can even pre-order it on the website if they want to.
I know AJ Bone will buy that one immediately.
No doubt.
So one sold, 2, including me.
Yeah, it should include our Eric Freeman reuniting. I don't know if you even know that, what we pulled off on the show.
Last year, around Christmas time, we did a Christmas episode where we united for the first time ever the killers of Silent Night, Deadly Night 1 and 2.
On air.
So we had Robert from part 1 who played Billy, and then Eric Freeman who played Ricky.
Yeah.
And they came in, and it was kind of like...
it was awesome.
Yeah, and Eric Freeman hadn't done anything yet. Like, no one had heard them.
Just the idea of getting them both together that made me really geeky.
And it was, and they totally loved talking
to
each
fun.
other.
Yeah, it was like they had like trench stories together about making Silent Night, Deadly Night movies.
Yeah, you really probably would appreciate it given everything.
Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. We will be back next week with another exciting show.
And there's rumors that Ryan might even circle back.
Yeah, I think Ryan might be back next week.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But
Thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah.
And thank you for coming down.
Yeah,
cheers.
no problem.
Bye.